Hello, in this section, we will continue to learn about the operation of services. In this section, we will learn about data output. Data output includes two output modes, output and random acquisition. Here we will give you a brief introduction. Similarly, we open a case that we made before. Here we select the case of backend to add a service called our output. Here we double note our output operation. However, as you find out, as our backend service writes more and more, we will find that this side is a submission of data, and this side is the output of data, which is likely to happen. What if you mix it up? It doesn't matter. We can use our object container to make a classification through the front end, and the same can be done in the back end. So here, we can make a classification through the object container. For example, this is our submission operation. We throw these two services into our submission. This is called our output operation. Throw such a newly built service into our output. Here is a demonstration of the simplest output operation. Generally speaking, if we output all the content without any difference, we don't need a receiving parameter, because we can output all the data directly through our database. Since we want to get the corresponding series of output content from the back end, we must design a return parameter, which is us. In this way, we define a simple operation of one output, so we call through our service, select our registration information table in the same selection object in our database, and then select one of our output operations here. You can see that after we check the output operation, it contains one of our filters conditions, sorting methods, output functions, output columns, and a series of operations. Here, we will first make the most basic output, so let's directly conduct a trial handover. Then, when it is finished, let the current service output the value of our output result object array, so in this way, we are equivalent to completing an operation of indifference direct output. Now that we have defined such a service, we click a debugging. Let's take a look at the results. We can see that it puts our data ID 12347 a series of values, that is, all the values of 12,347 in our database have been output. We can take another look. All the values have been output. Why are all the values output? This is because, we did not set a filter condition for it, nor did we set a limit on the number of rows. Here, so I'll demonstrate 2 points for you. The first point is its output column. We can see that by default, we check all the paper, but in many cases, we don't need a submitting user, his creation time and update time. Therefore, here we uncheck some unnecessary columns. Let's do it again. We can see that it only contains the data ID, the name and age have introduced themselves. Some students may ask me about the data ID. When I show it in real life, I may not need it. Then why should I output the data ID? Please pay attention. If we want to update the data ID is used as the unique primary key, and it does not repeat the update. The efficiency is very high. So generally speaking, if we want to update the content of a database, we will take the data ID as a transit value, so no matter whether we actually show a content such as data ID or not, we still need to pass its corresponding data ID to the front end. Okay, after that, let's go back and talk about our output lines. We can see that there is a simple explanation for our output lines here, that is, from the beginning. If we want to output the first 10 data, we can fill in 110. If we don't write any lines, he will output our first 50 data by default. As for our output operation, paging output is actually a very basic operation, so let's make a simple demonstration here. We can see that there are 5 pieces of data in 12347. If I want to input 1 or 2 pieces of data here, we can debug again. We can see that these 2 values of data ID 12 are output. What will the 2 pieces of data of 34 look like? Let's debug it again. You can see the data of 3 and 4. Similarly, what if we want the data of 5, 6? You can see that the last piece of data with ID equals 7 has also sorted it out. So what is this? Can this be used for paging output? So here, I share with you a paging operation that we often use in data output. If we want to page, 2 parameters are indispensable. The first is called the amount of data per page, and the other is a current page number. For example, if my current page number is equal to 1 and the current page number minus 1 is 0 multiplied by 2 or 0, so when the current page number is equal to 1 so far, there is 1 in front, and then the current page number is equal to 1 and the amount of data per page is equal to 2. So here is 1 times 2, so it is 2 lines. Similarly, if the current page number here is 2, what is 2 to 1? It's a pair. 1 multiplied by 2 is 2, 2 plus 1 is 3, and then 3 is followed by 2 times 2, which is 4, so it's 3 4. Therefore, it is equivalent to such a formula. You can write down that the value enclosed by the current page number minus 1 is multiplied by our amount of data per page plus 1, and then our current page number is multiplied by each amount of data, so that we can achieve a simple page. Let's debug and have a look. At present, when my page number is 1, you can see that 1 2 come out, and then I add 1 page number, debug it, and 3 4 come out. Similarly, add it again, and it will come out in the last hour. In this way, we have done a simple paging. It is necessary to cultivate such a good habit of paging when all data is output. If you don't do paging, the amount of data is very, very large, which can easily lead to a very bad experience. In this way, we have learned 2 points. The output column controls the number of columns, and the number of output rows is used for paging. Then there is another sorting method. In fact, the sorting method is very simple, which we learned in previous courses, that is, you should sort in ascending or descending order according to different contents. For example, here, I want to arrange in descending order through age, and then change a page number on each page here become 1, and then 10 pieces of data per page. Let's debug and have a look. You can see that now it is 19 18 18 12 12. You see, it is arranged in descending order according to our age. Therefore, if we need to use a sorting method, we will set a value of such a sorting. So if we need a sort, we'll set a sort method here. At the top is our filter condition. In fact, the so-called filter condition is our conditional output, which is our search. In fact, for us, search is a special conditional output mode, so let's click the plus sign here. For example, here we can also search a name, such as I want to search a name here. The person who is equal to Lisi suddenly called me here to add his conditions, and what about him? His name is equal to a content of a name submitted by us. Of course, there are many ways to write here in addition to being equal. For example, it does not mean including or not including. It is okay to start with and end with belonging and not belonging. That is according to one of your own search conditions, you should choose it. Here, I just make his name equal to our name in order to conduct a search, so here we conduct another debugging. You can see that in the final output structure, because it needs to meet our screening conditions, that is, our names and other names, there is only one output condition in the final and then it can output one of our output results. And then there is a separate knowledge point here for everyone to accumulate, such as me. It may be necessary to retrieve a name and an age, but sometimes I don't want this condition. What should I do? You can see that if my debugging value is empty by default, I click a debugging, and it has no corresponding value. So if we set a filter condition here, we don't clear a debug value of it, we can ignore such a condition. What should we do if we ignore such a condition for a search in actual use? Here is a value to share with you. We can enter an English 1 for many years, and then an ANR for more than 0 years. ANR 0 is a debugging execution specified by us, that is, a debugging of a certain value. The value is called a doodling, which means that the condition is ignored. So we can debug it again, and we can see that all its values are written to it, and this value can be passed in through the front end, so it can be very flexible for us to carry out a search of the content. It is equivalent to that through such a series of settings, we have completed a very simple service that can query a person's name and all the contents, so this is our ordinary output operation. Now that we have finished the output, we should do the same thing with the corresponding operation of the front-end end. Similarly, since our front-end end has not yet done the corresponding UI, so here we go to make up for such a series of UI. Here we can slightly rework a plan here, take it and use it, and let it do a level of play and effect. Similarly, let's add a column, and then make this column become an open height. Next, let's add a row. Let's make a simple one URL. The series only includes name, age and self-introduction, so we also set the name and age self-introduction here. For example, here is a name, then our age, and then a self-introduction. Here our UI is a little simpler. We select all and change one of its fonts to 1A15 size character. Similarly, turn the color of the text a little lighter, and then set its width, that is, 50. Then introduce yourself. 50 may be too short. Here, give him a 200. Then we select such a line and change its alignment to an equal spacing, as if it is slightly crowded. Then we paste such a line. Starting from the following line, each user's real content is poured in, so here we debug the upper border of a line here, and give him a little color. An effect of a good split line comes out. The name of a good reform is our header, and this is our information card. But what do we call a card? That is, we need to create a content by circular creation, so in 2 weeks of our page, we will add an object array to accept the data of the front end, and a structure import here is a value of our registration information table. Then irrelevant, such as update time and creation time, submit the user, which we don't need. We can give it to X and change the name to our registration information. Then, for the same value here, we must create it through circular creation. Therefore, here we add a circular creation container and drag it in the data source selects one of the indicators of our registration information. We also bind the differences. These contents are all the contents we learned when we learned to create the cycle. If some students have forgotten, we can go to our cycle creation and learn again. We will be a little faster here, so we won't need to learn any more. A detailed introduction is given. Okay, we can drag the header outside, because the header does not need to be scrolled, and then the following content is to be scrolled, so a cutting property here is changed to use scrolling and y-axis. In addition, since we have just done the paging content, we also do the paging function here. There is a paging container in our page navigation here. We can add such a paging container after registering and put it here. Then we can observe one of our paging containers. When it comes to pagination, we need to give him a series of values such as the total number of data, the data volume of Maya, and its current page number. So we add another data item under our page, which is our data item number. It is also convenient for us to carry out a macro setting. Here we can add another data item called data amount per page, so we can make a series of balances in the front end. Since we use paging and paging, we need to know the total number of pieces of a data, so we add a return operand here, which is called our number of data pieces. How do we debug the data? The data adjustment is actually obtained through our statistics. I'll simply demonstrate it for you. For example, us to select one of our enrollment information tables, we need to perform an operation of counting the number. Its filtering conditions are actually exactly the same as those of our enrollment output. Therefore, we still select his name here, which is equal to the paper of such a name in our drop-down menu. As you can see, the conditions and output conditions here are completely consistent with the statistical conditions here. Only through such a statistical number, we can quickly get the total number of items that meet this condition. If we directly output, and then count the number of rows of such an object array, there will be a problem. What's the problem? What's the problem? What's the problem? That is, we have made a limit on paging here, and it can only enter 50 pieces at most. By default, if it will have 200 pieces of data in total, it's here in recent years, it cannot output 50 such an object array, so we need to use such a statistical number to do it. Similarly, here we also take a variable for a transfer, which is our statistical number. When he completes this operation, why do he copy our statistical number? The copied content is the statistical results in the drop-down menu. Let the same side return together to see this side. When it completes this operation after that, the number of its data pieces is a value of the number of statistics we have assigned on this side. Therefore, through this mode, we can make a return together. Here we can preview it again. When we debug, we can see that there are 5 pieces in total, and then all the 123,455 pieces of data come out. In this way, a service in our backend will the completion of completion, and then we can come here for a simple production. Here we call a service in our backend through an action group. The name of this action group we change, called our query. Call such a query action group, and one of its receiving parameters is exactly the same as the parameters we want to submit in the backend. This side contains a data volume per page, the current page number, and its name. On this side, we 11 are significantly the data volume per page, the current page number, and one of its names. When he performs a query operation when, it is equivalent to calling a service output from our backend. The data volume of each page is equal to the data volume of each page received here in our drop-down menu. Its current page number is the page number in the drop-down menu. Its name is a content of a name received by us. Then, when he finishes such a series of operations when doing, we will assign a value to our registration information. What is the copied content? Is an output data that returns the result. Similarly, we also need to copy one of our calls per page, and the copy of data calls is equal to one of our data calls. The last one below is called any filter value, which is equivalent to ignoring such a condition. So when the page is displayed, we call such a service to view its data. Come here and have a look at the preview. You can also see that the 123,455 data are completely displayed. Then let's do paging related content. For example, if I want to perform paging operation on it, what should I do? First of all, what about the data debugging on our paging container? Let's do a binding. The binding is equal to a data debugging value here, and then there is a data tone per page here. The data tone per page is bound to a value of the data volume per page here every month, and then the current page number is equal to 1. We don't care about it for the time being, and then we can set the paper here. For example, our data per page quantity, we default that it has 2 pieces of data per page, and then it is equal to a pair at the beginning. Then we will take a look at the preview now. Because we have bound, the default here is that it only outputs 122 pieces of such data, so he outputs the first 2 pieces of data, and we can see that it has only 3 pages in total. Why not 3 pages? There are 5 pieces of data in total, and 2 pieces are displayed on each page. Should there be only 3 pages? Then I want to view the data through paging. What should I do? We select a paging button here. When it is clicked or the current page is changed, it can be changed directly for the current page. When its page changes, we call an action group of our query again. Its data volume of a beauty industry is still equal to the value of a beauty industry data volume defined by us. Its page number is equal to the current page code selected in the drop-down menu, and its name is the same. We can still default to select no condition for the time being. Is any filter value of our application system. Let's have a look at the preview. In this way, when the first page 1918, then switch to the second page 1812, and then switch to the last page, only 1, wait a minute. It can be seen that through such a mode, we can directly use our paging for data output, and the paging data output is also a very important point for us. Then let's make the next point, that is, how can we add our conditions? Since we want conditions, let's add an input box here and a button for retrieval. Input box and button. Let's copy and paste one directly from the front. For example, we input or copy a name here. Let's paste it here, put it here. Let's pull a line here to install it, and then pull a button next to us. First pull a horizontal input box in, and then pull another one next to the same side. There are 2 buttons. Let's go to the next room to copy one, and then come to the line here to paste it. It seems too wide. Look, there are 200 on both sides here. Don't be so big, 150. Okay, there's still a little left. The screenwriter doesn't want it. Then the background color of the clothes here is cleared, and then let him make a vertical and centered alignment. It's still a little margin from the left. Change its width to 40, and then give it a 24 on the outside left. Then it's not called submitting fund data. What's it called? It's called our search. The same width may be too high. We can make it a little smaller and wrap it, and then leave a screenwriter with 12 pixels up and down in such an industry, and then we empty the color of a series of headers below, otherwise it won't look good. The same color of the crack below is also cleared. Okay. So our next operation is when we click such a search button, we will go to a search of the content, which is the same here. We will replace one of its event. When it is clicked, what is it to do? Is it to call one of our queries action group? What is the amount of data per page? Is the amount of data per page the value of the amount of data per page defined here? Is its page number the current page number in our page? Similarly, his name is equal to the name in the input box on our side. Okay, let's preview the current page. Let's search here. For example, one of our Aston click search, you can see that Aston is a piece of data, and a page including the following page has also changed, but the students want to ask, what if I click a search after clearing it, and I hope to directly display all the contents? Show what all the contents are and whether they are practiced like that. So here, we teach you a very useful method, that is, let's judge whether the content in such an input box has value. If it has value, we will search the content in the input box. If it has no value, it is equivalent to ignoring this condition, what will be used to retrieve all the contents. It's our ternary expression. Let's ask if there is value in the content of such a mullion. If there is a value, we will make it equal to a content in our input box. What if it has no value? That is, we can see that this is a very classic way to write any filter value in the application system here. Is there only one in the mullion? If there is a content in his own mullion, there is an arbitrary filter value. Of course, this condition can be written here if we do not stick it. When we include the output of one of our pages, we can also write it in this way. When we perform a paging operation, we can also write it in this way. This is a more versatile method. Let's preview it again once. Through such an example, I want to tell you that in fact, the output of data should be simple and very simple. You do not limit its output, do not page it, do not limit its sorting method, or even do a conditional filtering, so you can directly select an output for the whole content. But in the actual application production process, we usually remove some fields we do not need, so we will set an output force. In addition, when we do more than one output, it is impossible for us to output all the qualified values to one brain at a time, but to output one output through our paging output. If paging output is used, the simple difference of such a current page number multiplied by the amount of data on each page plus 1, and the subsequent current page number multiplied by the amount of data on each page is a very classic way of paging output. If you need to sort, check the sorting method here. Then, if you want to carry out a condition filtering, you can set a corresponding condition here. If we are involved in pagination, we need to count a number of it, and return the value that it finally meets all such conditions, as well as a content that we are going to output to frontend. When we carry out a front-end system of this type, when doing this, you can notice that we usually use our action as a group to complete a production, because in this way, we can no longer do any repetitive operations, and our data volume of each page is better to use a variable for a separate storage, so that we can directly make a flexible modification. For example, we don't talk about 2 here. I'll change each of 2 pages into one of 3 pages. I just need to make a simple modification here. In addition, whenever a search involves us, we can use such a ternary expression, that is, if the content in our input box exists, search the content in its input box. If the content in the input box does not exist, we will change it to an arbitrary filter value, which is also a very classic operation. It is necessary to manually operate such a series of contents. Of course, there is also an output called random access. In fact, random access is much simpler than our data. Here we will not demonstrate it anymore. If you need to have a random access scene, you can go to see such an action directly. The above is the whole content of this section. Thank you for watching.